It has just been revealed that the Reverse Flash was going to be the big bad of the SnyderVerse, and it was going to be revealed in the Flash movie. Hey everyone, welcome back to our movie news. Oliva, who is an American storyboard artist, film producer, and animated film director, and worked on the DCEU, has revealed some very interesting details about the SnyderVerse. This completely changes the whole perspective of the DCEU and the overall SnyderVerse. If you don't know, the Flash movie we got this year was never the original plan. The Flash has been technically in production since 2017, but had directors drop out and huge changes to the DCEU affected the story the movie was going to tell. Now, I've read through this article already that Oliva was in, and I have to say, this original plan for the DCEU sounds 100 times better than the one we got, and it's a real shame we never got to see it. In an interview with Inverse, Oliva had this to say. While little is known about Rick's cancelled Flash movie, the cast at times included Ray Fisher's Cyborg and Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, one thing is clear, it was nothing like the movie released in 2023. Rick's movie wasn't the Flashpoint movie, Oliva says before detouring into a brief DCEU history lesson. Originally, there was supposed to be just Zack's 5 films and one side movie, which ended up being Suicide Squad. But after the success of Man of Steel, Warner Brothers decided to go all in on a cinematic universe. Rick's movie was going to be a series of films, just like Aquaman. I think all of those films, they were planning to be trilogies. The Flash movies would have been particularly important to the DCEU. However, because of a plan to introduce a classic DC villain, Eobard Thawne, aka Professor Zoom, or Reverse Flash. Rick's movie was laying the groundwork for Zoom as the big daddy of the DC universe, Oliva says. It was Professor Zoom pulling the strings because he had come from the future to basically mess with Barry. In the Flash movies, Zoom would be the villain in the background, but also in the ancillary other films. You would see some of the influences of Zoom on the rest of the Justice League. This all would have come to a head in a Flashpoint movie, which Zack Snyder revealed previously at a 2019 Flash screening would have wrapped up his Superman-focused saga and served as a reboot for the entire franchise. At the end of Zack's Darkseid quadrilogy or whatever, we would end up with a Justice League Unlimited version of the SnyderVerse, Oliva says, referencing the popular 2000s cartoon that featured a sprawling roster of DC superheroes. And then you flip it. You do a Flashpoint paradox. Everybody whose friends are now enemies, and it's a world that you don't want to live in. You can reboot the universe and introduce a new cast that way, because after 10 years, the actors need to go on to something else. For Oliva, that planned Flashpoint movie was also a chance to bring his original animated film to life, complete with this epic world-destroying conflict between the Amazons and the Atlanteans. In both the comic and the cartoon, the story hinges on a fatal love triangle involving Aquaman and Wonder Woman. I wanted to really capture the grimness of the comic, but also lay the groundwork for adapting this as if it was a Marvel live-action film, he says of his 2013 animated film. I just thought that would have been fantastic. Can you imagine Jason Momoa fighting Gal Gadot and then having that love story? All of the missed opportunities, Oliva concludes with a hint of whimsy. Being a part of it was so exciting, and then having to shift gears and pivot, it's kind of sad. I would have loved to have seen it get to this point. And I would have loved to have seen that too. That sounds incredible. To have not only Snyder's 5-movie story arc, but also a trilogy for the Flash with Reverse Flash being at the heart of it, but also pulling the strings behind the scenes with the entire DCEU would have been mental. I'm so upset with Warner Brothers for being such a reactive and incompetent studio that just decided to scrap all of this because of some negative reviews for the studio cut of Batman v Superman. They were so desperate to catch up to Marvel that they were convinced that the reason why Marvel was so successful must have been because they were light-hearted comedies, instead of realizing that the reason why people fell in love with the MCU was because audiences were able to connect to the characters over multiple movies with good stories being told. The humour was a bonus, and it was actually far less prominent in their early days of the MCU than it is now. But Warner Brothers stupidly thought that the reason why people loved the MCU was because of their humor and not their storytelling. The key thing to focus on is having a cohesive long-term story. Having a lot of generic humor but a poor story can't result in a good movie, but a good story and not much humor can result in a good movie. But Warner Brothers thought the humor was the key to success. After 2016, Warner Brothers prioritized humor over story and forgot about a connected universe, which is the dumbest thing they could have done. Even if they decided to put humor as the focus, at least have the movies directly connecting to one another so audiences can follow along. This original plan for the DCEU sounded so good. We were going to have Darkseid and Reverse Flash as the two big villains of the DCEU, and then in the final movie, the Flash was going to reboot the entire universe, which would have given a satisfying and definitive ending to the DCEU. The majority of fans would have been so on board with the DCU if the DCEU had a satisfying ending. The DC fandom is so divided. I know that Twitter doesn't display the entirety of the DC fandom, but one look at a DC page's comment section can give you a hint into how divided fans are. Bickering over everything. One piece of news comes out and there's a huge division in opinions. And why am I talking about this in a video about the original DCEU villain? Because the actual original DCEU villain was never the Reverse Flash or even Darkseid. It was Warner Brothers. They fueled the division in their fanbase. They created the toxic side of the DC fandom. They never committed to a storyline. They went back and forth on their decisions. They started off with Snyder and then scrapped it halfway through, but gave enough of it that fans wanted more and then told them to move on with no respect. And now with reports like this where people who worked on the DCEU come out and talk about what could have been, just angers fans even more. Superhero films are designed to inspire. Fans get a very special connection to those movies. Some grew up with them and they became a foundation of their childhood. Some watched them as adults and felt an escape from everyday life. And some just loved watching their favorite heroes on the big screen. Fans connect to those movies. Fans were connected to the DCEU. Maybe not the critics or angry fans watching Batman v Superman studio cut, but that was one movie out of 5 that were key parts of the DCEU. Their ego was so big that they didn't even realize that the reason why the DCEU wasn't able to succeed was because of them. They negatively changed 4 out of the first 5 movies in the DCEU. Out of Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman 1 and Justice League, only Man of Steel wasn't interfered with by the studio. Wonder Woman 1 had its final act reshot by the studio. Batman v Superman was forced to cut out 30 minutes of the movie to make it a shorter runtime. The director of Suicide Squad was told by Warner Brothers to make the movie more like Deadpool and had Jeff Johns rewrite a lot of the movie, and Justice League had Joss Whedon come in and reshoot like 80% of the movie to make it more like the Avengers. All of the negativity the DCEU faced was because of them. They would have been far better off allowing the filmmakers to tell the story, and if after those 5 movies they weren't successful for the company, then they could have changed direction. But the box office was showing that the DCEU was a financial success for the studio. The fact that an unknown group called the Suicide Squad was able to make $745 million at the box office goes to show how hyped fans and audiences were with the DCEU early on. They were so reactive that they listened to critics after BVS and decided to completely change the direction they were going in. They also expected the movies to make billions of dollars each time because Marvel was able to do it with some of their movies, but they completely ignored the fact that they had to build up their universe before reaching that milestone. The early DCEU box office was a clear indication that things were going in the right direction until Justice League 2017 came out. The DCEU was building something unique and it was financially successful for them. There were many fans who were connected to those movies and the story they were setting up. And then they stripped that away from those fans and then expected them to move on. I'm telling you right now, the DCEU may have not been as large as the MCU in terms of amount of movies, but it would have rivaled the MCU at the box office if they went with this original plan. Greg Silverman, the former CEO of Warner Brothers, stated that Zack Snyder's DC films were very profitable for Warner Brothers. So that argument that the early DCEU movies flopped is a complete lie made up by people trying to twist the truth to fit their narrative. The DCEU was heading in the right direction. And this original story sounded incredible. Fans should have seen it unfold. I think fans have every right to not forgive Warner Brothers and to not trust them with the DCU. Because sure, it's now Warner Brothers Discovery, but they have acted just like Warner Brothers did. They said Henry Cavill was back, they told him to announce that he was back for more. And they got rid of him and used the loophole of, well, he was not on contract, so we didn't fire him, we just didn't hire him. That angered a lot of fans, and so they are no closer to uniting the fandom than Warner Brothers were. The original DCEU plan is something every fan should have seen. I don't want to say this without actually seeing the full plan of the DCU, but just from what we know so far, the original plan of the DCEU sounded a lot better than that too. The difference is that the DCU has a larger ceiling. It has a higher potential because it's being fully backed, and we still don't know the full plan Gunn has in store for us. It looks like Gunn is looking to put smaller characters at the center of the universe, whereas Snyder was using the biggest characters. Now personally, there's a lot of characters I don't care for in Gunn's plan. I would rather see the biggest characters at the center, and then once you've built a solid foundation, then start integrating the smaller characters in. I think the big characters are the most popular for a reason. I think trying to build a DC foundation with half of the roster being smaller or unknown characters won't help at all, because a lot of the audience won't really care about them. I know we haven't seen the big villain for the DCU yet, or even the first film, but just hearing that we would have had Darkseid and the Reverse Flash being in the DCEU and all heading towards a Justice League Unlimited on the big screen, and now we're going to have Peacemaker Season 2 and Creature Commandos is so demoralizing, as in the time we are seeing it. If the DCEU continued, we would be at the Justice League Unlimited phase around right now, which is what we would be looking forward to at this point in time. Now it's a half-assed reboot with Creature Commandos. The DCU might get to a part of the plan that the DCEU was heading towards, but that won't be for another 10 years or so. And that's if Warner Brothers Discovery doesn't decide to change direction halfway through. I don't think we can trust them. I could very easily see them abandoning the DCU if it isn't financially successful in the first couple of years, which I can see happening. Just look at the DCEU's box office since 2019. Flop after flop. And now using smaller characters in the DCU at the start will mean this universe will struggle to get audiences in the cinema, and Warner Brothers Discovery needs money right now. But that is all unknown. We don't know for sure if the DCU will succeed or not. I hope it does, but I can't see how it will right now. Hopefully the final products speak for themselves. But what we do know is the original plan for the DCEU. Something that sounded incredible. Something I wish us fans got to see because it would have been top tier DC stories. Maybe us fans can work together to create those stories that the DCEU was going to tell, and try and bring them to life. Some have suggested that we've been getting a lot of SnyderVerse news recently, and that maybe something is going on behind the scenes. I don't think that is the case, unfortunately. I don't think they would do that sort of thing before the DCU has even come out. That wouldn't help that universe at all. But make sure to let me know what you thought of the DCEU's original plan in the comments below. But that is all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss a video. I hope to see you here again soon, so until then, have a great day. Bye!